What is the truth in the stories we are told? We've been given a story of a world fueled by separation. We've become separate from one another, separate from the earth, ultimately separate from the true nature of ourselves. It's time we learn the truth. It's time you rewrite your story. It's time to realign with who it is that you really are. This is the fifth dimension.
You are infinite and eternal. We are infinite and eternal.
Our natural essence, we could say, is simply being.
We have this awakening coming together as a perfect storm.
We're ready for this. We have the capacity inside. We just got to find that.
All right, everybody, welcome into the Fifth Dimension podcast. And for today's show, I am joined by Cathy O'Brien, and her story is truly one that is one of the most powerful that I have heard. And the way that she is able to navigate her past and a lot of the darkness that she has seen and experienced, and still be anchored in resonance and light. It's truly inspiring. So, Cathy, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to be able to have this conversation.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk with you too. This is a wonderful time to be able to bring truth to light when people are needing the truth so much.
Absolutely. I feel like we're starved for it. And
yes.
So, I would love to start for anybody who maybe is unaware of you or doesn't know your story. If you could start off by talking about sort of your experiences. You're a survivor of the MKUltra program, and maybe could you talk about what that actually means to be a survivor of that and your experiences, but also sort of, I realize I think a lot of people, when I say MKUltra, they don't actually really know what that is. For a long time, I even thought it was just some sort of single experiment that took place with LSD. And you think, there's a sort of surface level definition of MKUltra for a lot of people. So could you just talk about sort of your story within that and maybe give a deeper understanding on what this type of program actually is?
Yes, I understand why you would think that about MKUltra, because like so many other pertinent topics that we need to know, the information's been suppressed for a long time. And then it was diverted over here with it was just LSD experiments, when in fact, MKUltra mind control is a powerful scientific formula for mind control that picked up where the Himmler research left off. So this was brought over from Nazi Germany after World War II and through Project Paperclip. Project Paperclip brought in the Nazi and fascist scientists into the US. They're put in rocket science like Werner von Braun with NASA, and the mind scientists were brought in too for implementing MKUltra mind control. By the time I was born in 1957 in Muskegon, Michigan, MKUltra mind control was already in full swing. It wasn't just an experiment or something that people were looking into. In fact, it was the CIA was heavily involved in taking the information that the Himmler research had learned, combined it with what the Catholics had long since learned about the effects of trauma on the human mind through such things as the Spanish Inquisition, the Crusades, and the horrible things that went on to promote the Catholic Church back in the early days. The CIA was wanting this information to roll into a more powerful form of mind control, especially when you add the technological aspect and the fact that we had TV by then, and television was coming on strong and was given voice to a new form of mind manipulation of the subconscious mind, which is what we were bringing in from Nazi Germany. I was born into a multi-generational incest-based family, and my father was sexually abusing me before I ever could even think to know what he was doing was wrong or to think to judge it in any way. My brain knew it was wrong. My brain knew that I was suffering pain and the suffocation of his abuse. So my brain compartmentalized memory of that event. So the rest of the mind functions normally. This is defined as the mind's sane defense to trauma too horrible to comprehend. It was incomprehensible what my father was doing. So the neuron pathways of the brain actually shut down and repressed that memory. That's what repressed memory is just our mind-brain function that we have a right to know and a need to know that has been kept from people far too long. So I had this dissociative disorder. When a child is sexually abused prior to age 5, they develop a very heightened suggestibility, which is exactly what was wanted for the this new world order, one world order, this globalist slave society agenda that we're all experiencing right now. It's what's happening in our world right now, as it's just a small handful of the same dark force energy vibration manipulating the minds of the masses, because knowledge is our defense against mind control. And that knowledge has been suppressed for a long, long time. That's what motivates me to speak out, is to bring this truth to light. It's love for humanity that motivates me to bring this information to light. Because when what I experienced in MKUltra mind control was extreme and on a very high level, eventually on a White House Pentagon level, because this local politician approached my father and told him that he could receive immunity from prosecution for his trafficking me throughout our local Blue Masonic Lodge that my grandfather ran, and for making child pornography of me. He said he'd give him immunity from prosecution. This was back in the earliest 60s when this was already happening, where national security was being invoked in our court system to sanction pedophilia. When we understand what this pedophile agenda is really all about, that it's a mind control slave society agenda, we'll be more effective in being able to take a stand against it. When we understand that human trafficking has been going on my whole life, I was being trafficked. It is the funding mechanism of this new world order globalist agenda. We need to realize that's why human trafficking is the most lucrative business in the world, and that child sex trafficking is a massive moneymaker that has been going on for so long that we need to wake up and face the cold, hard reality that it's happening, and that we share this planet with some very evil, dark force people with a horrible agenda. And once we face that truth, we'll be able to effectively start taking back our freedoms and our strength of human spirit. We'll be able to protect our children. No one protected me. No one thought to protect me from the abuse that I endured and what I experienced after my father sold me into the project. Just became increasingly systematic, because that local politician was Gerald Ford, who went on to head the Warren Commission that covered up the Kennedy assassination, which is when this globalist agenda started sneaking in behind the scene. They were called shadow government back then, but it's a mind control agenda. It was one that was manipulating the media, and Gerald Ford was very much a part of all that. As his political career escalated to become president of the United States, my victimization rose proportionately until I was used on a White House Pentagon level and being trafficked out of the Washington, D.C. swamp. It gave me a lot of insight into how MKUltra mind control, what their plan is for us all. And I wrote that in my 1995 testimony for Congress, Transformation of America. It outlined how elections were to be stolen, how the New World Order was being ushered in for this mind control slave society agenda, and how it was so that a handful of big guys make all the money and we do all the work. That's just the plan. They know that we would stand against that They know that humanity would not allow for our children to be abused for mind control purposes. They know that we would take a stand against the kind of horrific trauma that they are inducing on society. And that cannot control the strength of the human spirit. They cannot control the power of love. And that's what they fear the most, is the human spirit. So since they can't control that, they can only control our expression of it by controlling our minds. That's what the global mind control purpose is all about. That's why they're doing this, is so that we can't express our strength of spirit. And that's the essence of our being. That's the beauty of who we are. That's where life's purpose matters. That's where the harmony and flow and the synchronicity is. That's where love is, the most powerful force in the universe. And that's what they're just trying to squash that down. The only reason that they're able to get as far as they have is because people haven't realized what's going on. And as we realize it, that's a giant step forward. Knowledge is our defense against it. Awareness is the first step towards positive, necessary change. And that's where we are today. People are waking up.
Absolutely. And I think that that tide is definitely turning. I see it, every day there's more people sort of uncovering. And I feel like this agenda that you mentioned is becoming much more out in the open, if you will. And for a lot of people, it's almost impossible not to see what's taking place. And it's interesting. I do feel like this has been permeating under the surface for decades upon decades. And I've been doing a lot of reading of Rudolf Steiner lately. And 100 years ago, he talked about they would be using medicine and certain material forms within the system to eliminate the spirit for the purposes of control, right? So this plan dates back over 100 years. It's the same dark forces that have been around, lingering, looking to gain control. And as the technology has increased, they're much more able to, I guess, covertly do that. Do you think you could talk about how it was that you I guess, escaped from this sort of programming, and talk a little bit about that story, because I think it's really inspiring to hear the help that you did get. And it shows, the compassion of others, but two, what is possible for us, once we're able to look past our programming. Because there's a lot of people who are still in the grips of this MKUltra program. And, we can certainly get into that. And I think it would be important to know who, I guess that if we look at the top of our political structure, a lot of the names there are all under the grasp of programming. I don't know why people expect more from them nowadays. But could you talk about how it was that you sort of were able to reclaim your own individual sovereignty, perception, and, at one point, all you knew was your programming. What is it that you that difference now is being in your individual sovereignty and be able to think freely, and just talk a little bit about that.
Yes, the kind of MKUltra mind control that I experienced was very traumatic, and I experienced a lot of torture to the point where, and deliberate systematic programming on various NASA and military bases, to the point where I was totally robotic and could only do exactly what I was told to do. And I couldn't think to escape my abuse. I couldn't think to even protect my own daughter from the horrors that were being forced on her. I couldn't think to do any of that. Fortunately for me, an intelligence insider working on the highest levels of mind sciences, Mark Phillips, saw what was happening to people like myself and my daughter. He knew the human trafficking was funding the shadow government, this deep state, the New World Order globalists. He knew that was going on behind the scene. He saw it coming in, and our constitutional values being eroded more and more. He knew what the plan was for mind control over all of humanity, and that pertinent information on our mind-brain function was being suppressed from the education system, from mental health. People didn't even know how to help trauma victims anymore because of the suppression of pertinent truth. It's our birthright knowledge that we have a right to know and a need to know, because we have a right to know the amazing strength of the human spirit, the resiliency of our minds and our bodies. We have a right to know that we don't need big pharma and their drugs, that we have an amazing immune system that we've been blessed with all along. These are things that were being suppressed from humanity. And Mark Phillips was livid that that was going on. And he was especially, what really just did it over the line for him was when he saw the pedophilia being used to blackmail and coerce certain politicians and judges and everything else, and how the pedophile agenda was funding this, and the abuse of children was so blatant. He was furious. He had gotten a view into the plan for mass mind control using trauma, because trauma and fear are the basis of mind control. He saw that being planned when he was studying mind sciences at the Psychological Warfare Division of the War College, where Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino was also studying to see the effects of trauma on the human mind so that he could use his Satanism on the US military bases, because mind control is used on and by the US military, and Satanism is certainly a strong form of trauma. It's horrific. The blood traumas are awful. The immorality, the inhumanity of it all is just so extreme. But he was studying there. So Mark was so disgusted when he saw what Aquino was doing and what the plan was there. I mean, they became arch enemies right from the get-go, and Mark was determined to be able to make a positive difference in light of the information that he knew. So in 1988, he rescued my daughter Kelly and I directly out of the Washington, D.C. swamp. I was turning 30 years old, and I was to be killed, especially for the criminal covert activities that I saw NAFTA rooted in, which was a precursor for ushering in the New World Order. And it was drug and human trafficking across our borders. So he intercepted me on my way to that demise and rescued my daughter and I direct, and handed me keys to my own mind. Mark did not deprogram me. He just gave me a safe environment where I could begin to heal. Just like my brain responded to what my father did when I was an infant and compartmentalized it. I couldn't think to know that I was safe. I didn't know good people even existed in the world anymore. I had 30 years of robotic, torturous MKUltra mind control. I didn't know there were good people anywhere. And yet here was Mark, and Kelly and I, my daughter and I, were safe for the first time. And even though I couldn't think to know to trust Mark, my brain knew. And it started opening up. And just like it shut down the neuron pathways, it started opening neuron pathways, and information began to leak out. And as that information would leak out, I would get these memory flashes that would dominate my mind. And I would get these flashes. And Mark told me, the pen is mightier than the sword. And he handed me a pen and he said, as soon as you see a flash, make a note of it. And just make note, and then follow that thread in later, and dump out that whole compartment of memory. So that's what I did. I wrote out memory. Mark also strapped a watch on my arm and said to monitor time so that I could stay consciously aware. I was regaining conscious awareness, and yet it was something so foreign to me that I couldn't formulate a thought of my own. Like if I wanted to have dinner, I couldn't think to what I would have. My brain would go into this black hole. So I had to get those neuron pathways firing in new ways where it could start opening up my mind, where I would have conscious awareness. As these neuron pathways started opening, and as I was starting to get conscious thought, then I gained a concept of time, because I had so many deliberate compartments in my mind that I had no continuity between. This part of my brain was unaware of this part of my brain, and so it went. So I had a heightened endurance because over here I did all this and I didn't know it over here. So my brain wasn't signaling my body to be tired. So I had this extreme endurance, and that's an example of that. But I also had no concept of time whatsoever. I didn't know how old I was. I didn't know what year it was. I didn't have any ability for that. So the watch became very important for me to be able to start monitoring time, because being consciously aware of that would ensure that I wasn't dissociating where it leaves the subconscious wide open to being manipulated. I needed to be on alert. I needed to be consciously aware and start protecting my thought. So the watch was very important too. And these methods that Mark taught me are basic mind-brain function, important information that's been suppressed for a long time. And we were able to release this information, the healing methods that he taught me, in PTSD Time to Heal. I've posted it on my website, since we've all experienced mind control masked as a virus imposed on the whole global population, while this slave society agenda is being, well, it's not being ushered in quite the way they wanted it to be. They're really frantic and desperate because everybody's waking up. And as we're waking up, people need the tools, the simple tools that I had, so they too can reclaim their free thought, free will, strength of spirit, their power of love, and their ability to start thinking free beyond the programming, beyond what they've been manipulated to believe, and refuse to tolerate this nonsense anymore. So the way that I healed is now available on my website. I posted it in ebook form so that everybody can have it now, regardless of income. It has a pay what you can if you can option, so everybody can, just have it, because we all need it now. Our knowledge base has been altered through controlled media. We all know that truth is censored. We all know that we've been manipulated. We've been conditioned for so many generations that it's imperative we start expanding our thinking again and exercising our brains into new, bright directions. Mark taught me to voice no negatives without a solution. So even as I was writing out memory, then I would need to think in terms of a solution. Well, that was hard to do, but I started being able to do that. And by thinking of a solution, my brain was firing in these new ways. And it was like going out of the storm and the darkness and turmoil of the storm and rising above it and getting a clear view for the first time ever. And we all can do that by picking up a pen, because it uses the logic part of the brain. It shifts emotionally incomprehensible trauma, all our fears, all that that brings us down. Write it out with a pen and paper. Typing doesn't use the same brain function, so it's important to use a pen. We could all write it out. And as we write it out, write out a solution that will force us to think in new ways and give us a clear vision, and also empower us to start making a difference right in our own backyards, because really that's where it starts. We've got to start taking back our sovereignty from within first,
Right.
And then start making a difference all around us and expand and grow from there. And that's what unites us all. That's where we're strong.
Absolutely. The power within the hands of the people and local communities, and it branches outward. And I think that's the direction that I'm feeling called to keep exploring towards, keep going within myself, finding ways to become more self-empowered, finding ways to make a difference to the people around me. And then together we can create solutions, and it's interesting because I think a lot of people look at sort of the large scale program like MKUltra, or they look at the large scale perceived power that I think these systems have over us. And I think it's an illusion how much power they do have based on, we're looking and seeing how frantic they are acting at the moment in regards to us awakening. So clearly they don't hold that much power. But I think people can almost sometimes feel overwhelmed by the nature of the beast that we're dealing with and the level of, I would say, evil that they are willing, this sort of program is willing to go to have it implemented, which can create in turn almost a fear-based response and a sort of a victim complex, if you will. And, I've been trying to stay in the mindset that it almost doesn't really matter what we're afraid of, whether it be a virus or the new world order itself.
Right.
We're still acting from a space of fear, and
Yes.
we can't necessarily come at this from a fear-based response. Otherwise, we're just going to sort of perpetuate that cycle of fear. And I think that's there's a whole lot of people who maybe are starting to see it, but they're still in that fear-based mindset. So I don't know. Could you speak to that that power of fear and love as a potential counter to that?
Truth frees us from fear. People just need the facts. They need to understand what's going on. And once they realize it, that in itself starts diffusing all control over us, because knowledge is our defense against mind control. Truth really does make us free. We just need to share that truth with each other and realize that's why media is suppressing truth. They don't want us to know it. And then when we get to the divisive nonsense being imposed on all these divisions that are skin deep, whether it's race or gender or what, it's just such nonsense. When we realize that kind of division is just intended to keep us from communicating with each other, much the way they compartmentalize memory deliberately in a brain so it can't intercommunicate and have free thought. They're trying to do that to society as a whole and keep us divided. When we realize that those divisions are imposed and look beyond it and reach out to each other with compassion and love again, we unite so deep right there. All of a sudden, the divisions are gone. We see our strength. We realize that we are by far the majority, and they really are just like behind the wizard's curtain, pulling levers to create an illusion of being more powerful than they are. We bought into that illusion because one of the levers they pull is media. And that media is something that we need to learn to understand how we're manipulated by media and its repetitiveness, like social distance, mask up, whatever. The repetitiveness of it alone is important. So when we go into a grocery store and we hear the same repetitiveness over the intercom system, mask up, social distance, whatever. Those are the things that it would be good to pick up a pen and paper and write it out. Because even if we don't mask up, I've never worn a mask. I knew it was MKUltra, mind control. So even if we don't do that, we still need to make note of it so that it doesn't affect our subconscious mind. And we can start taking control of our thinking from that point forward. When we control our own thoughts, when we reclaim that again, we'll come out of that place of fear. Fear is immobilizing. They want to keep us in a fear space. You notice as soon as we all caught on to this mind control mess as a virus thing, they come up with a war, and it will be something else and something else. And they will keep doing that until we don't listen to them anymore. And that's all we need to do is just stop listening to them, stop marching to their orders, stop caving to their fear. We don't need to. Truth frees us from fear. And the truth is, we are by far the majority. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. It's within us all to reclaim our free thought, free will, soul expression, strength of spirit. Just as I did, it's these easy to self-apply methods. It's just a thin little book that it's written in. It's not about me. PTSD Time to Heal is about us all. It empowers people to find their own truth. Once we know our own truth, we'll recognize truth around us. And when we see that truth around us, everybody will be celebrating like I do. I have waited my whole life for people to wake up, and it's happening. The Great Awakening is very real, and it's a beautiful thing to see. It's cool to see parents standing up to the school system imposing, mind control in the school system and this so-called gender confusion, which is just more of the pedophile agenda being promoted, parents are standing up. Nothing's stronger than parents. There's no military stronger than parents. This is making all the difference in the world. And when each one of us makes a difference wherever we stand, out of compassion and love for each other, then we win. Game over. They already lost. And Mark would assure me with little pearls of wisdom like that, the bad guys already lost. The good guys have won, and the bad guys just don't know it yet. So we need to claim our victory. We need to live our victory, live our freedom, and show them that they are not going to manipulate our minds and our lives anymore. That's all it takes.
Absolutely. Standing empowered in the present moment now, instead of thinking that the victory itself is something that's coming in the future. It's already here now. And I think the fact that we,
Yes.
you and I can sit here with control of our own perception and in turn control of our own reality means we have already beat that mind control system, because I can't think of anything that they can do, that would, because their frequency is so low, because they're not,
Yes.
they're in a space of fear. And, I'm over up here in the, centered, anchored in love and truth, and really making that my base level for my consciousness.
Yeah.
There's nothing that they can do to bring me back down there, because it's not on the same frequency, right? And if I were down,
Exactly.
then it's all a frequency game, right? And so as the frequency rises, there's nothing that they can actually do to bring you or I back into that lower frequency, unless we do it to ourselves, which I have no
Exactly.
intention of doing. So
I'm not going to either. I have no fear. I have no fear of them. I have no fear speaking truth. I have no fear whatsoever, because that's their vibration. That's their level. And they took enough of that from me, and the tortures and traumas that I endured for so long. While they tortured me, they could never make me one of them. They never could possess my spirit. They could only prevent my expression of it. And while I was being tortured, my spirit was always in a safe, loving space. It's like how when we hear people who have near-death experiences, like maybe they're in a car accident or something, and they say they see everything from above, and there's like this little silver light line to their body of, whatever. In so many ways I can relate to that, because my spirit would be in that safe, loving space, only it wasn't even just an overview. It was a bigger overview than that and it was such a place of love and peace, and knowing that we already won, that that light overcomes darkness. Darkness can't creep in on light, but light, we shine one little light and the darkness is gone. So all of that kind of knowing from that space that I was in, which I kind of refer to as love space, or it's going back to source, and whatever name we want to give that, it's within us all to rediscover for ourselves and anchor back into. People meditate to go to that space. They pray to go to that space. And for me, it became a freeway, because I had endured so much torture and trauma. So I'm so familiar with, I'm leaving that wide open. I'm staying there. I am not going back to any kind of fear and low vibration. That's what they want, and they're not going to get it from me. I'm going to stay living the love that I am, because once I gained free thought, free will, Mark, I loved Mark so much right from the start. How could I not? But he was slower on a relationship. He said, you need to know who you are in order to have something to give in a relationship. And so I had to heal first. And it was a great motive to heal. Love is the greatest motive for healing. And in that process, it was like, who am I? I'm certainly not who they attempted to make me be. And Mark had explained to me too, he said, you're not responsible for what you were tortured to do. You're not responsible for what they forced you to do under mind control. But now that you're aware, you're responsible for every action going forward. And I was like, wow, responsibility, the ability to respond and make the choices. What a gift, what a wonderful thing to get to be coming from the source of love. It's like, okay, so who am I? And any daily, people say, well, you have to love yourself. And it's any daily affirmations outside myself wouldn't work, because anything outside myself was all I was used to. And I couldn't judge who I am based on other people's opinions of me or what they had to say. I had to find it within. So I went deep enough within, and I went right back to source, right back to that love space, the essence of my being, which is love. So I live the love I am, which is so much easier than trying to love myself from, the outside for whatever reason. Instead, I live the love I am. And it's so much easier. And plus it gives me infinite strength and infinite clarity, because when we rise above the negativity that's so immobilizing and so blinding to a higher vision, to the higher view, it's clear to see what our life's purpose is, why we're here at this pivotal moment in time, what our life purpose is really all about, how synchronicity unfolds and the coincidences line up. Just like, it's such a beautiful flow of life when we're living love and in that flow and having compassion for each other. Everyone can find that space again. It's a joyful space to be. And when we're there, we're no longer fueling their energy source, which is hate, the device of hate, which is fear, which is trauma. That's their energy. That's why they keep imposing it, not only for mind control, but because that's the energy they feed off. That's their vibration. They can't have any more of that from me.
Right.
No more.
Right. And if we starve their energy source, just the natural byproduct of that is going to be a new way for humanity. We're not going to follow that agenda, that path that they have set out for us. And it's interesting because I recently, somebody the other day told me what the definition of compassion was. And it was, when you break up the word, calm is to be with, and then passion is suffering, if you look at the root word of it. So compassion, to be with suffering. I think it's one, to have compassion for yourself. It is to look at the programs of suffering. It is to understand the pain and the traumas that have taken place, because we all have those deep within us. And if we can actually sit with it and find our true nature, ask that deep question of who am I beyond the name and the identity, the labels, the divide and conquer rhetoric that has been placed upon us, then we begin to have a deeper understanding of ourselves and the relationship we have with the world and others. And, I think that's where we can truly take an empowered stance to create a new paradigm, a new way of being. And I do think now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. It feels like there is a little bit of a sense of urgency, if you will, and maybe it is just more people awakening. So there is more taking place in terms of this paradigm shift, and sort of almost, if you will, the tower of their foundation crashing down a little bit, so creating chaos. Do you feel there is a sense of urgency in the sense, because a lot of this is based on technology, right? And it almost feels like technology is there now really a way to, and I had a great conversation with James Tunney, who's an author and really holds a mystical perspective and anchored in that love and light. He was talking about, we really have almost a bondage relationship with technology, in the sense and sort of the transhumanism agenda and merging man with machine. And it really feels like technology is sort of their way to attempt to keep us into this system almost unconsciously. So it does feel like there's a sense of urgency based on the technology they have to bring us to a point of no return. And I don't want to say that. I say that, I don't want to say that lightly, I guess, just throw that around, because it does feel like there's a point where we can get to where our perception is hijacked beyond the ability to regain it consciously, if everybody is sort of at that point. I mean, what is your thoughts on what their timeline is, and how we can sort of unplug from their technological, I guess, agenda? Because I mean, there's pros to technology. Obviously, we're sitting here on a Zoom call having this conversation and able to spread love and able to spread resonance, right? So, I mean, we can certainly use these innovations for good and for light. And, I think there is divine purpose in them. So, it's almost a gift that they're rolling out certain technologies so we can use them to, I would say, achieve greater understanding. But what are your thoughts on sort of that, I'd say, a deeper sense of urgency and sort of the timeline that, because we hear a lot about Agenda 2030 and specific dates. So do you have any thoughts on that, and what sort of our sense of urgency needs to be, if anything?
Yeah, well, it's a 100-year plan, and it definitely was supposed to have been completed 2016, when Hillary Clinton was supposed to go into the office of president to usher in this new world order slave society agenda. That was the plan. And the technology, like I mentioned, even at the onset of our conversation, TV had come on. So they were like going to use that voice. And then with the Kennedy assassination, which would traumatize the whole nation when they gained so much more hold, that was soon after that became the electronic voting machines. That's when those came in. And as soon as those came in, that was the technology that they were using to make sure that they would have key people in political places of influence in order to bring in this new world order agenda. This plan is a 100-year plan that is laid out by computerization, artificial intelligence, DARPA. Those were things that I knew were going on back when, and I knew that's what they were following. Well, a computerized program, when you think about it, artificial intelligence, no matter what kind of technology we're looking at, it is linear in its projection of knowledge and information. Whereas we have wisdom, we have strength of the human spirit, we have that power of love, which isn't anything that any kind of technology is going to be able to relate to. That's where we win, that's where they lose, that's where our strength is. And that's why they're using mind control in an attempt to squash that down. So technologically, they can't control us either. Artificial intelligence can't control us either when we reclaim we're born within us all along, and that's this power of love and strength of spirit. So it becomes a spiritual battle of technology and goodness, or good and evil. However we look at it, we win. We have the ultimate force and the ultimate power. Since Hillary was supposed to usher in this New World Order 2016, they've been frantic ever since. That's why they just blatantly stole elections 2020 right in front of us. We all saw it happen. Everybody knows it happened. Even the bad guys we know it happened, and they don't care because they figured they'll just keep bombarding us with trauma, like mind control masked as a virus and war, telling us that violent the burning of our livelihoods is that kind of violence in the streets is peaceful demonstration, doing the satanic reversal on words and all like that. These are technological things that are having an effect on us. Once we understand the limited, narrow little game plan they got going, we'll see why they can't even alter it to cover their blatant mistakes. And when they show us their hand, and we all see exactly what cards they're holding and what they're going to do next, and when they contradict themselves and openly contradict themselves, like they do, they're not concerned with that because they figure they can use the technology and just use vibration and manipulate our minds that much more. No, it's not going to happen when we gather our strength of spirit. Even we can overcome technology even. It may take a moment's thought to consciously acknowledge, like, wow, where'd that come from, and go back to the to our core energy and not allow that to happen. And as we reclaim this free thought, strength of spirit, then the technology itself is neither good nor bad. It's who has control of it for what purpose. And then we can use it for intercommunication like we're doing right here, right now. I think this is amazing. I can feel your vibration, even like I just feel such a closeness with you as we're talking here. And this is something that we can use to intercommunicate, to share truth with each other, to strengthen each other, and to grow in the directions that we want to be able to take things like big pharma out of our food supply and go back to, not only organic farming, but the kind of farming that's just in harmony with nature and just is the perfect flow. We can teach each other all that with technology. So the technology doesn't have to be bad, but we just need to regain control over what's being imposed on us, because there are vibrational frequencies that they want to keep at their level and affect us with it and keep us from being able to rise above it. But we have it within us. Our energy is stronger than theirs. We just need to realize it and live it.
Absolutely. It's really a return to who we are. And
yes,
then understanding that all of our current system, whether you mentioned the food supply, we talk about sort of the technological bondage, the politics, all of it has been manipulated and used against us. And this new, this return to love and the heart and who we are, it's almost a radical 360 compared to the inverted nature of a lot of our system, because it is designed to keep us in that low frequency. And in order to do that, we have to invert sort of what comes naturally to us as human beings having this experience here and now. Like this, life is truly a beautiful gift. And I think when we can recognize the beauty that's present in every moment, like, when we can find beauty in any moment, at any place, at any time, even in the midst of the darkest of chaos, simply because beauty is the essence of our, it's the very essence of perception. It's the very essence of who we are. Like so when we can tap into that, the world opens itself up to us, and there is the infinite possibility of who we can be, what we can do. And, the path that we're creating now, it feels like such a inevitability that we're going to come home to it, beyond this system, beyond the fact that you've already said that we've already won. Right. And, I think there almost needs to be and this is difficult for a lot of people, there almost needs to be a death of the previous self, a death of the old system, the old way. And first, it has to happen within ourselves. Like, we need to let go of the attachments and almost the dependencies to our old ways of thinking, to our old programs, like the attachments we have to even the trauma, right? And we have to almost let that die so our new self can emerge and be reborn, right? And I think that death process is what we're in the midst of right now, and maybe why we're seeing sort of this collective. There's a lot of collective turmoil, if you will, and a lot of people buying into that chaos or seeing through the chaos and maybe having a response or reaction to it. Could be the death process in action, because a lot of people have that, deeply, deeply rooted fear of death, which is really just a fear of the unknown. And, so I don't know, it feels like a time to be reborn and a time to celebrate that. And it's interesting because, I almost have to pick my audience sometimes when I say, oh, it's a beautiful time to be alive. Because, if you say that to somebody who's in a frequency of fear, then it's like, what are you talking about? And you have the people who maybe don't want to give birth to kids at this time, right? Or because they look at the state of the world. But, I view it as the opposite. It's a beautiful time to be alive. It's a beautiful time to, have children and bring them up to be empowered and free thinking and sovereign, and really create the stability and the love and the assurance within ourselves. And I don't know. Yeah.
We need to reevaluate our values and reprioritize our priorities. We need to re-examine all of those aspects of life that we've had going on for so long, because like I said, this is a 100-year plan, and they're getting really close to the end of it. And that makes a huge difference when we look back on the slow erosion of the kind of values that we would otherwise be living. And we don't want to really go back to how things were before elections were stolen in 2020. We don't want to go back to how things were pre-mind control masked as a virus being unleashed on humanity. We need to go forward in light of the information that we now have, because once we've experienced mind control and recognize it for what it is, then I have a wall against it forever. We are immune to it from that point going forward, as long as we stay consciously present in the reality of life's purpose and life's meaning. We have such opportunity in front of us, and I'm really excited where we're going with it now. And I see where, like, people in the grocery store who were, when they were out masking up, and people aren't doing that anymore. They're over it. They've caught on to this whole thing. And that now, not to laugh at anyone, because I have so much compassion for people, but now there'll be like that one person in the grocery store with a mask and, and looking so scared. And you can tell it's still the one CNN watcher or something. And they've got their mask on, and they look around and nobody else is wearing one. And they're used to being with a herd. And now all of a sudden, and they see people smiling, and people are smiling at them with compassion and kindness. And people are living their freedom. And so they're catching on. Mind control programming is like screaming in their brain, mask up, social distance, that it's going to kill grandma if they're not doing that. They've got all these fears screaming in their brain, and they can't hear what we say over it. So we can't just say, take off your mask. It doesn't work that way. They can't hear. Like you said, you gotta talk to your audience. But by living our freedom, by living love, by smiling, and by looking at them with compassion, like, you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to say it. You could just show them, because you're living freedom. Take that and expand that to all aspects of life. And we can see how this great awakening is happening. It's just catching on and catching on. We're igniting it in each other. And it's happening on such a mass scale that, yeah, it's an amazing time to be alive. It's such a celebration of freedom and joy, and seeing people reclaim what they let erode for so long. I'm excited. I waited my whole life for it, and it's happening. It's happening.
Right.
So beautiful.
It's happening rapidly. And, there's something that I just thought of that I'd love to ask you about, because, we're moving into this new time of compassion, of love. And it makes me think of, what is, let's say the people who are really, I would say, running the show of like the MKUltra and the mind control programs. For you personally, was it difficult to bring a sense of maybe forgiveness or compassion to these people, who are caught within the mind control programs, right? I know I look at like a lot of the politicians, right? And you had a great story in the Trance documentary about George W. Bush, right? And how you had great compassion for him, because you saw that he was simply, he was acting out this program and this agenda, right? But he was simply a victim of the same thing you went through, right? So how would you say, finding forgiveness for a lot of what is taking place, the people operating it, and, especially if a lot of them are simply victims of programming, of trauma, how we can still see what's going on and not condone it, and not, um, it doesn't necessarily mean you excuse things that are happening, but how can we continue to hold compassion for these people? Because, when if I'm externalizing the enemy and I am saying, oh, these people are truly evil, and yes, a lot of the acts are evil and the agenda is evil, but the core of their being, who they are, it's the same as me, right? Like if I were in that exact same programming, exact same scenario, uh, in the victim of those same exact circumstances, I would have done that same exact thing, because I wouldn't have had the perceptional I don't know if that's a word. I don't know if I would have had the perception to act outside of it. Right. So
Right.
how are you able to find forgiveness and compassion? And do you think that's important moving forward for us collectively, to look at the people in charge of this and look at them with compassion and love, instead of wanting justice or revenge?
I don't want revenge. And to me, the ultimate justice is positive change through public awareness. There's not going to be any through a court, because things are not always so black and white and so simple. I can look at someone like Hillary Clinton and know what she is, and the horror that she feeds off of, literally. Yeah. The people like George Bush Sr. that believes in the pedophile agenda to such an extent that he would traumatize and control his own son to make him a Manchurian candidate to carry on the program that he believed in. They are a different vibration. I cannot condone that in any way, and I can't justify it in any way in my mind. They are a low vibration frequency. They have no business meddling in our minds and in our lives. And they need to just go away. Yeah. But it's understanding what is going on and understanding mind control that has given me the freedom from bitterness and vengeance, and then realizing that's their frequency anyway. I'm not giving them anymore. They're not getting that from me. And people like my own father, selling me into the project and what my father was involved in. I don't have any animosity. He was sexually abused. How much free thought did he have? I don't know. Well, did he ever reclaim it? Did my mother? I don't know. That it's our own individual path. And it's certainly not one for me to judge. I'm not a judgmental person in that regard. It's imperative that we start factoring mind control into the equation, though, because when we look at someone like Ronald Reagan, who I was exposed to it's detailed in Transformation of America, which is my testimony for Congress that was censored under national security. It's detailed in there. What I experienced with Ronald Reagan is absolute, does not go away. But what Ronald Reagan experienced is what people need to know, because prior to the assassination attempt on him, he spoke of constitutional values and freedom, and he spoke in ways that people understood and gravitated to. After that, his actions going forward did not compare with what had led to that point. When a person endures that kind of trauma and then is exposed to MKUltra mind control techniques, they are no longer in control of their own mind. I've always said Ronald Reagan was not in control of his administration. George Bush Sr. was. George Bush Sr. was the power behind the scene for many presidencies. But nevertheless, he was the one who ran Reagan's administration. Him and Dick Cheney, and they treated Reagan like dirt. I mean, they treated him so bad behind the scene. And yet Reagan could go out to the microphone and he'd say what he needed to say to the American people. And at the same time, we had global education going into the school system to mind control the children. Would Reagan have chose that? Would he have allowed for that to happen? Had he been free to think for himself? Would he have really allowed for human trafficking and drug trafficking across the borders to be the groundwork for NAFTA for the beginning of the New World Order agenda? Is this what he would have chosen? No, this is what we need to start considering, is that when trauma occurs, even people as in powerful positions like the presidency can be controlled and manipulated, especially when there is a plan from the get-go to eliminate him and get him out of the picture. He refused to cooperate with the New World Order, and George Bush was going to take control one way or the other, and he did. And he did it with still using the presence of Reagan. When we consider that and realize the magnitude of that in its entirety, we realize that people need to have their own free thought, free will before we can hold them accountable for their actions. Reagan was no more accountable for his actions than I was under mind control. I have the joy and the latitude of being in control of that going forward. And I love taking responsibility for my life. I love to be interactive with compassion and care and making a difference everywhere I can in light of truth. What would Reagan have done? Who knows? We need to realize there's a lot of politicians that are being subjected to some form of mind control, whether it's blackmail through the pedophile agenda, which is massive. The blackmail on perversions is huge. We need to realize that that's a form of mind control, but it's not quite mind control that technology might be using. So we need to consider all of that and stop thinking that the politicians need to be leading our lives when they're not leading their own. Or who is leading their own? How many of them are? Until we understand mind control and start factoring it into the equation, none of us can make that judgment.
Right. Absolutely. And in terms of the politicians not leading their own, it's really the blind leading the blind in a lot of ways.
Yes.
That's sort of how it goes. And I guess in that scenario, the one-eyed person ends up being king and controls over. And that's oftentimes the people who are at that top of that agenda, and they're with the nefarious intentions. And I guess, in this piece of having that awareness, I think it also can, extends to just the people we encounter every day in our lives. You mentioned the person in the grocery store, right? Who's still, double masking and, ready to line up for another injection when the time comes. Right. And, holding compassion for that and not saying, oh, you dumb sheep, like, what is wrong with you? And sort of going to the route of, degrading their personal choices, because they're operating within a program, but that's still their individual choice. It's like, okay, I see it. I'm going to hold compassion and love for you as a being and present to you that there are other options and present to you truth in the best that I can. And if you're open to receiving that, wonderful. Let's love each other and be friends. And if not, well, I'm still going to love you. And even if you hate me for the truth that I'm bringing you, there's still compassion there, right? And I think extending that to everybody who we encounter each day, because ultimately, beyond elections and beyond, I guess, there's not a ton that we can do, I guess, when looking at the sort of large scale machine in Washington, D.C., right? The impact that we're going to have on that is much more prevalent in the choices that we're making every single day, right? I believe the collective at large is really just a macrocosm for the individual state of awareness oftentimes. And so, if we're hyper focused on that collective at that Washington, D.C., we're not focusing on our day to day. We're not focusing on who we're interacting with in our local communities and the difference that we can make and the ability to love. So it does feel important to really extend exactly what you're saying, that awareness and recognizing everybody's programs, everybody's conditioning. And a lot of it, we don't know, we don't know where people are at in their own awareness oftentimes upon first meeting them. So extend compassion, extend love, and, go from there. And I think that's how we're going to ultimately create this new paradigm, this new way of being, and ultimately really I guess, rewrite the story of humanity, rewrite the story of mankind. They had one narrative and one story that they're pushing a certain path. And, you know, the alternative story is emerging in front of our eyes. And I think if we can take the conscious steps to write that ourselves, it's an inevitability because we're the crafters of our perception is what creates reality. So, there's nothing to fear about the future because it's all love and beauty as long as we're tapped into that. And so I'm excited. So Cathy, we're at about an hour. This really flew by. Your story is truly remarkable and powerful. Do you have any sort of, I guess, tips for listeners or thoughts about, to sort of finish up how they can continue to stay grounded in conscious awareness, in love, and really for anybody who's listening and maybe still has that healing work to do. And I think we all have deeper layers that we can continue to look at. It is sort of never ending. What sort of steps would you recommend people take to really dive into that healing process and dive into looking at the programs and in accepting that, maybe they were a victim in the past and the committing to a path of healing and moving forward, and how people can do that?
Look into PTSD Time to Heal and apply the methods there because they're easy to self-apply. And it's such a joy to reclaim freedom, and healing is a process. It's not an event. So we need to have compassion and patience with ourselves all along the way and start being really good to ourselves. Take time for ourselves so we have time to give others. That means walk out in nature, breathe in the air. Take time for silence, listen to nature, get away from the technology for a little while, and reground with the beauty of our planet. These are all things that we all can do. And as we reclaim our consciousness, the collective consciousness that we have moving forward in light of love, it's going to light the path forward. We need to teach our children by the values that really matter and realize that our education system has been eroded deliberately for bringing about the New World Order slave society agenda. We need to realize that we've had like 3 generations now programmed in the school system with misinformation. They took writing by hand out of the school system because it's the part of the brain function that allows for critical analysis. It's very important that we put that writing with pen and paper back into the school system and check the text, because history's been rewritten so that it's destined to repeat, and put that truth back in education and the values. Maybe we'll do education a little differently. Maybe we'll teach our children ourselves. Maybe we'll just learn the values of our earth and learn from nature again. I love to see how nature interacts with each other and how it all takes care of each other. It's so beautiful. Animals aren't just a feeding chain like we see on TV so much of the time. There's so much more going on, and the beauty of the interactions is just astonishing. And we need to reconnect with all of that and reevaluate our values, reprioritize our priorities, and live our love again, and just, it's all so simple and beautiful when we go back to source and what we're intended to be and live life's purpose.
Absolutely. And the answer I think a lot of people are looking for is just what you stated. It is, and it's very simple. Like we don't need some crazy, like high strung a solution, like where we're, I don't know. I think a lot of people overcomplicate what we need to do. And what you just described is exactly how I'm intending to live my own life. And I know a lot of listeners of this show are doing the same thing. So, Cathy, thank you so much for coming on and holding such a space of resonance and love, and again, sharing your story in such an empowered way. Because I'm leaving this conversation, I'm feeling very inspired, empowered myself. Like, I felt pretty good coming in, and the vibration it continues to raise as, have conversations like this. And, we can empower one another and collaborate
Yeah.
in spaces like this.
Exactly.
Is there anywhere you'd like to send the listeners? I mean, I know your documentary, the documentary you were in just recently came out. You have your few books. Like, is there any websites or social media or where you'd want to
Yes,
send
my
them?
website, trance-formation.com. That's TRANCE-formation.com. My information is the integrity of the information is secured there. So there's so many free ebooks to dilute the truth of my testimony. There's just so many attempts to censor and dilute the information, but the truth is right there. PTSD Time to Heal is posted there, and the movie is also available through there. So at my website, trance-formation.com.
All right, wonderful. And I'll put that in the episode show notes. People can scroll on down right there. And, I think the longevity of your message, the fact that, you've been speaking on this now for I'm 26, so just about as long as I've been alive.
Longer.
I was going to say
longer.
So, I think truth stands for itself and people recognize truth. Yes. So I would highly encourage everybody to go to your website and check out your work. And, let's definitely plan on collaborating again in the future. I think, there's, despite what some people think is chaos coming, I still see a time of positive transformation coming. So,
it's happening.
Absolutely. We'll definitely have to collaborate again and see what the future holds.
All right. Yes, I look forward to it.
No, me as well.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And thank you to all the listeners. And we shall see you all on the next episode.